Hello, everyone. Welcome to our advocacy webinar, which is focused on grassroots communications today. This webinar is designed to teach you how to be the most effective verbal and written advocate for the causes that you care about. Now, just as a reminder, this is a webinar series of the Democracy Partnership, which represents a collaboration by two organizations, Maine Citizens for Clean Elections and the League of Women Voters of Maine. Our agenda for today will include an approximately 30-minute long presentation by our panelists, as well as a 30-minute Q&A at the very end. So with no further ado, I'll introduce you to your panelists. We're very lucky to have two very experienced panelists with us today, Ann Luther and Pam Cahill. Ann Luther served as president of the League of Women Voters of Maine from 2003 to 2007 and as co-president from 2007 to 2009. In addition, she worked closely with the Maine Clean Elections as co-president from 2006 to 2011, and she is active in the League of Women Voters Down East and has served on various national committees for the League of Women Voters national organization. Ann joined the League in 1998 when she retired as a product manager at SEI Investments. She was also a founder of the MDI Restorative Justice Program and served on its executive board and was deeply involved in youth issues with MDI Tomorrow. Pam Cahill is a seasoned veteran in Maine legislative circles, having served in both the House of Representatives and the Senate for a total of 14 years, including serving as Republican floor leader in the Senate. Pam has a broad knowledge of procedure and protocol from a legislative as well as an administrative perspective, and her experience also gives her insight into a wide range of public policy issues that come before the legislature. After her tenure in government, Pam spent 6 years working for Duke Energy as a community liaison, and then became a partner at Howe, Cahill Company, a leading Maine firm specializing in government projects, association management, and project development in 2006. And so now Ann will begin the webinar, and we'll look forward to your questions in the end.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining the webinar this afternoon. We're really looking forward to this third episode in our series, and we'll have a fourth one coming up for you in a few weeks. Today, we're going to talk about putting you in the picture in terms of lobbying and citizen advocacy for the public policy issues that we all care about. We're going to talk about how ordinary citizens testify at public hearings, writing letters to the editor or op-eds, talking to legislators one-on-one, whether that's at the State House or in your home district, and how to track bills through the legislative process. We'll be taking your questions at the end, so we're really looking forward to a good discussion today. When we talk about citizen lobbying, I want to spend, we're getting a little feedback there, sorry. I want to spend just a minute talking about speaking for the League and speaking for MCCE and speaking for yourself. The official testimony of the League or MCCE, these are two important statewide organizations. The official testimony comes from the president of our organization or her designee. It's carefully crafted and vetted by the advocacy committee and speaks to our official position on a public policy matter. We talked a little bit about the advocacy committee in webinar number 1, and it is a combination of volunteers and staff. And if you're interested in joining the advocacy committee, you can get in touch with us and learn a little bit more about it. But the official testimony comes out of the advocacy committee. Some of you on this call are already members of the advocacy committee, and some of those who are may be asked to deliver our testimony on occasion. But today we're talking about you making your statement, a statement of your own. And the League or MCCE may issue the call to action. You know, you may get an email or a web alert from us. But when you answer that call, we are getting a ton of background noise. I don't know what that is. But when you answer the call to action, there should be no confusion about whose voice is being heard. You're speaking for yourself, not for the organization. And that's important, not only because it avoids confusion about what the organization's position is and what words the organization uses to speak to that position, but also because it's more powerful. Legislators are going to take your testimony, your message, more to heart when they know it's authentically your own. So when you write a letter to the editor, when you write your public testimony, keep references to the organization out of it. We all know organizations like the Tea Party and Move On and many others. And when they send out a call to action and thousands of messages come in with the exact same wording, those messages are often deeply discounted. And what we really want is to hear from you in your own words and have you make it your own. Pam?
Thank you, Ann. This is Pam speaking, and I also want to thank all of the participants for joining us today. So when you're at the legislature or talking to a legislator, it's important that you tell them what your story is. Tell them who you are, tell them what organization you're representing and why, and your commitment to a particular piece of legislation. It's your message, your energy, and we want it to come from you as an individual. So you want to get to know your legislators because they really care what you think. You're the ones that elected them, and they want to know what you think. So it's a great time right now because we just elected a whole new crop of legislators. About 1/3 of the Maine legislature has turned over since last month. And so it's a good time to call those individuals in their home districts, call them up and say you have an interest, you have a piece of legislation that you'd like to talk to them about, and how about meeting them someplace for a cup of coffee or downtown in the town office. Some legislators hold meetings down in the town office of that sort of thing. So also, if you go to Augusta, if you come to Augusta, be sure you let them know that you're in town. Even if you don't want to talk to them about a particular piece of legislation, they'll be happy to see a familiar face once they're in session at the State House.
This slide we're going to use a couple times today. It's the key to success for everything that we're going to talk about. And we hear a lot about candidates and candidates being authentic, and how powerful that authentic message is, but it's equally true for those of us as citizens. The League or MCCE may provide talking points or a background briefing on a particular bill or a particular issue, but you're going to make the biggest impression with your own authentic message. Say why this issue matters to you. Use a personal story or an anecdote from your own life. Add something to the record that no one else can bring. Keep it simple. Pick one or two key points. Put it in your own words and tell your own story. And some of the most powerful testimony I've heard in committee hearings is just like that. One or two key things that's told from the heart and in someone's own words why this issue matters to them. Public hearings are obviously one of the most high profile and most visible ways that you can participate in citizen lobbying. So we're going to go to that one first. And the first thing we're going to ask you to do is research the bill. I'm included a link, and we're going to test the technology here to see if I can actually take you to this link and show you how this works. But when you refer to this later, you see how this link works. It's blah, 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 blah. LD 156. Now the LD, as you learned in the prior session, if you were on with us earlier, the LD is the legislative document number. So that LD number is going to change depending on what bill you're looking at. And then you see at the end, SNM equals 128, that's session number, and that's here referring to the 128th legislature, which was the last session. So when you're using this going forward, you would put your own bill number in, and for this session, you would say the 129th. But now let's go over there and just have a look at what you can get when you go to that site. So you're seeing it here on my screen, and this was from the 128th legislature, first regular session, an act to implement the national popular vote for president. This is a very powerful site. You can see here the text, the LD number, the House paper. It originated in the House. You can see the printed document. This is the official printed document that includes the names of the sponsors, the lead sponsor and the co-sponsors. And the actual text of the bill follows. You can see here down at the bottom, at the end of the bill, there is a carefully worded summary that is developed to reflect very precisely what this bill does. And if you are trying to get a handle on what the bill is, says, and does, this is essential reading. Back at this site, you can also see if there's a fiscal note on it. I don't think this particular bill did have a fiscal note, but if there is a fiscal note, you'll see it here, and that will tell what the financial impact of the bill is, how much the government is going to have to spend in the coming biennium should the bill pass. There's all kinds of great stuff here. So the text and disposition is what we looked at. If the bill had any amendments, you would see under this tab here, LD 156 did not have any amendments, but you can see the status in committee. And this is an important tab because once the bill is printed, the announcement of the public hearing, the date and time of the public hearing will appear on this site so that you can know when to go and what time and where to participate in the public hearing. As we learned in the last session, every single bill in the Maine State Legislature gets a public hearing, and this is how you find out when it is and where. And then once the public hearing is held, you can also see here that the work sessions are also announced. Once the committee has conducted its work session, you'll see that the divided report can come out. You can see how many voted with the majority, how many voted with the minority. And then once the bill goes to the floor, you follow this link for chamber status, and you can find, oops, that was the wrong link, sorry. Chamber status of House Paper 114. You can see when this bill got its floor vote. If there was a roll call, you can follow the roll call, and you can find the final disposition, whether it was dead or enacted and signed into law. So this is a super important site and one that you're all going to want to be using as we track bills through the 129th. The other thing to do when you're trying to understand a bill is talk to some people. Certainly our staff and those of us who work with the League and MCCE are happy to answer any questions about bills anytime. So calling our office is a good way to find out. You can talk to the sponsor. Call them up. It's a citizen legislature. You can find out their phone number, call them up and ask them what they understand the bill to do and get research that way. Talk to your other friends and colleagues. But the first thing is to try to understand as best you can what you're talking about and craft your testimony from that point on. Pam?
So you need to do some research on your bill, and you can do that. You can do some of the research by going to the link that is the League of Women Voters link on the screen. And you can also see previous testimony from previous people. And that way you can get an idea of the format that folks use when they're testifying before a bill. So it's important to do a little bit of research and to know exactly what you, well, not exactly, but basically what you're talking about so that you don't come across as being unprepared when you get to the legislature. So,
go ahead, Pam.
So this is mine also. So you want to understand basically what the bill does. When you're getting ready to write testimony, one thing you should keep in mind, and this is very important, is to keep your testimony very, very simple. Don't go into a lot of depth. Write 2 or maybe 3 key points that you want to make. And once you write, and no more than 1 typed page, and you usually have a time limit at public hearings of 3 minutes, and I can tell you from a lot of history that 3 minutes goes very, very quickly. So once you write your testimony, you should ask someone else, a friend or someone you live with, to read the testimony to make sure it makes sense. And also to make sure that you stick within that 3-minute time limit. It's important to do that. Brevity is really honored at the legislature, and they'll probably tell you that. Again, if you're coming to testify, call your legislator. she or he may not be on the committee that you're appearing before, but they might want to see you, and they might be interested in what you're at the legislature to talk about. You can also let the sponsor of the bill know that you're there and that you're going to be speaking in favor of the bill or perhaps in opposition of the bill, but let them know, and you can give them the reasons why you're taking a particular position. And then you want to listen to people as you talk to them, listen to what they're saying, listen to their concerns, and make a lot of notes. I always recommend that people bring a hard copy of the bill that they're testifying on, and that way you can write your notes on that bill. You can download the legislation from the site that Ann provided earlier, and you can also go to the document room, which is on the first floor of the State House, and ask for that LD. But it's important, I think, to keep your notes and the LD together, and by having a piece of the piece of legislation you're talking about right there helps you make that happen.
I'm just going to throw in a couple of things and to reinforce some tips that were given on the previous webinar. But one is bring 20 copies, at least 20 copies for the committee. Other people who are there testifying on the bill will want to take copies of your testimony too. So if you can bring a few extra, that always helps. And put your name and the town where you're from on your written testimony. That's also good for people to have after the whole thing is over. Go ahead, Pam, take it back.
So, this is a picture of a public hearing room. This happens to be the Appropriations and Financial Affairs Committee room. The bills, particularly that the League of Women Voters and the Clean Election folks testified before, is usually the Legal and Veterans Affairs Committee. That committee is much smaller. But each committee has 13 members. They have 3 senators and 10 House members. They also have a committee clerk and a staff person that does the research on the particular legislation. So again, make your testimony comply with the 3-minute rule. Sometimes they'll waive that rule if there aren't a whole lot of people waiting to testify or a whole lot of bills on their docket for that day. But I think it's always a good idea to keep your testimony brief. Make your points and thank the legislators for listening to your points, and then sit down. And then it's always good to stay and listen to what other people have to say about the bill. They may agree with you or disagree with you, but it's good to know where the folks are coming from.
I'll throw in a couple more points on this. We're probably going to run over, but I have a lot to offer here. Lots of times when it's a very busy committee hearing and lots of people testifying, you're going to get up to take your turn and somebody else will have already said what you're going to say. That doesn't mean you shouldn't get up and take your turn. You should stand up to the microphone and say, I agree with Speaker so-and-so with exactly what they said. They took my point. There's a couple of reasons to do that. Number one is to make sure you're counted and that your opinion gets taken into consideration, but also they are going to be so grateful to you for not going over the same material again. It's really valuable to bring something to the committee that nobody else has said. But if you're just going to put your hand up and say, I agree with so-and-so, they will be so grateful for your saving the time and not reiterating the whole thing again. Food and beverage are not generally allowed in the committee rooms, but even though I've done this a million times, I still get dry mouth when I stand up to speak into the microphone. So I do sometimes take a bottle of water with a lid on it, and that is generally permitted. There's no talking, booing, or applauding in the gallery, so it's generally decorum preserved. If you stand up to the mic and act passionate, that's all to the good. But if you're angry and start being accusatory or pointed with the committee members, that just generates an angry response back from them and turns everybody off. So passion is good. Anger is generally counterproductive. Sorry, I just had to get those in. Do you want to take it back, Pam, or add anything else at this point?
Just one other thing. Just also remember that your testimony becomes a public document. Your written testimony becomes public. So make sure that, as Ann said, you have at least 20 copies of the testimony. On your testimony, make sure you say with your name and where you're from. but that becomes a public document, and you're going to be able to, shortly after you testify, you will see all the other people that testified on that bill, and your name should be there as well. So be careful that you don't put anything in that testimony that you wouldn't want to be public.
And not only the written testimony, your oral testimony will be streamed live during the committee hearing and is actually recorded for posterity. So what you say will live long beyond the moment of the hearing itself. Now, testifying at a public hearing is not the only way that you can have an impact on future legislation. You can write a letter to the editor, and I want to talk a little bit about this too. The main thing about this is that they read this stuff. Your legislator reads this stuff. They have staff that clips them out of the paper to make sure that they know what their people are saying back home. And your local newspaper wants to be the place where these questions are debated. So they're always looking for content to make the paper the public forum in which public policy issues are debated. They are looking for content and will be grateful to you and welcome your submissions. Our organization and our staff, our volunteers in the advocacy committee can help you with some ideas, and we can help read the drafts if you want us to. But remember, back to our key things, it's your authentic voice that is going to make this the most interesting and the most persuasive. So it should sound like you. Writing LTE, it's generally, just a couple hundred words, no more. You want to keep it quite short. Pick one idea, make it very punchy and colorful, and then ask us or somebody else to read it before you send it in to make sure it comes out really good. Here's an example of a letter to the editor that got published just a couple of weeks ago. It was from League volunteer Deb McDonough, who had gone to the trouble of retabulating the ranked choice voting count using Excel. She wrote a great letter that was picked up by both the Portland Press Herald and the Bangor Daily News, and talked about how an ordinary citizen could take the very transparent data posted by the Secretary of State and get the same exact result that the official tabulation got. If you got more to say, then we'll fit in a couple of hundred words. You can bust it out into an op-ed. And again, the Portland Press Herald and the Bangor Daily News and some of the other dailies here will not publish material that's been published elsewhere. It has to be exclusive to that paper, but it can be up to 750 words. It's hard to write a good essay of 750 words, but you're going to be most successful, again, if you pick one or two key points, put it in colorful language that sounds just like you, make it punchy, keep it easily readable, and develop your ideas a little bit more. Keep it dense and packed with content, and get a reader, and then send it in. Again, the papers, especially the dailies, but also the weeklies, love to be the forum where these issues are debated. They're always looking for content, and when you have a strong piece, there's an excellent chance that you're going to get it published. This was an example of that. Becky O'Keefe wrote, I think she's up from Gooseboro, that she sent in to the Ellsworth American about her belief in ranked choice voting and how the experience of having ranked choice voting, what it meant to her in the second CD race this year. It was a great piece. So we're going to go back now, Pam, to citizen lobbying. Go ahead.
So citizens lobbying, like Ann said, we are in Maine, we're lucky to have what we call a citizens legislature, which means they don't have a ton of staff. Everyone thinks the legislature probably has their own staff person, and the truth of the matter is that everyone shares staff people. We do have nonpartisan staff in every committee now, which is a change from the old days when I was first there. But again, when you come to the legislature, give your legislator a call and say you're going to be there, and they have time to meet with you. Do some research on the stuff that you're there to talk to them about. It might not be a bill that's on the floor today or tomorrow, but it might be something that you're interested in. and listen to what they have to say about the bill. You might learn a lot if you just take a minute and listen, or ask, what do you think about this? Have you heard anything? Do you know any, how other people that are your peers are going to vote on this particular bill, how they feel about that? And they might tell you that they oppose the bill that you're there to talk to them about. But tell them that you respect their opinion, and maybe at some point there'll be room for both of those ideas, their idea and your idea, to work together on legislation, because just about every single piece of legislation that comes before the legislature gets changed before it finally becomes law or finally dies. So there's always an opportunity to leave the door open, and then report back about the information that you found out about it. If they were opposed to that, why they were opposed to that, and maybe you can make modifications to that bill to help them come to your way of thinking. So it is a lobbying day for you to do that, and the legislature really enjoys having members of the public at the legislature. There we go. So during the lobbying day, Anne said this before, but it's important to make it personal. If you have a personal story to tell, that is so very effective, because they're just like you and I. They're just regular people, and a personal story, it might deal with one of your children, or it might deal with a pet, or it might deal with an experience you had in the grocery store. So make it personal. Be considerate of their time, and be considerate if your legislator or the person you want to talk to is speaking with someone else. Don't butt in. This is a pet peeve of mine when people butt in after I've stood in line to talk to this individual for 5 minutes and then someone butts right in. So don't do that. So just wait your turn, and they will be very happy that you did that. Look up their photo, although I will tell you some of the photographs I think were taken in 1954. But look up their photographs, and so that you kind of know what they look like when you're going to approach them. And this is Anne's slide, but don't buy new clothes. They want to see you the way you are. So if you're a teacher or a farmer or a fisherman or a worm digger or a car dealer or a nurse, come in what you would wear to work. Don't go out and buy something special. Again, we're a citizens legislature, we're a rural legislature, and we want them to see you as you are in your home.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't want to.
The lifesavers and the Tic Tac that you might see, I always carry those in my pocket, because I don't know about you all, but I have always had a couple cups of coffee, and there's nothing worse than having to talk to a legislator and say, oh my God, I wonder if I have terrible breath. So put some lifesavers in your pocket, and so that you won't offend them that way. Anne has provided the slide. Oh, Anne, do you want to talk about these links? Are you going to go to the link?
I wasn't going to go to them, but the links are there because it's where you can see the pictures. Eventually, there will be some documents published that have the legislators' photos in them. But in the meantime, these links will take you to a photo gallery so that you can see what they look like before you get there. We ready to turn the page, Pam?
I think we are.
Okay. So it's all good to know. Sometimes when you go for a lobby day under the dome and you're talking to people who are not your legislator, I mean, you have so much influence with your own legislator. That's where your power base is. But sometimes in these lobby days we go and we're just trying to talk to as many people as we can. And in those situations, your job is just to get the information. You're not there to persuade everybody or turn everybody's head. If they're with you, that's great. Thank them for being on your side of the issue. You're so appreciative of their support. If they're undecided, ask what you can what information you can get them that might help persuade them, or if they'd like to hear from somebody that they might consider influential, you can try to make those connections for them. But if they disagree with you, and if they disagree strongly, don't waste your time. Just make a mental note. This person is on the other side of the issue. Thank them for hearing you out. And you can follow up with an email or a reminder just to let them know that your position is different. But whoever you talk to, it's always nice to send them an email or a thank you afterwards. Thanks for the time, reiterate their position, and thank them for hearing you out that day. And, you know, if you're working on an issue with the league or MCCE, we're going to want to know everyone you talk to and what their position was on the issue, because we're counting votes. That's what it's all about, right? I know Dean is giving me the hook here and saying that we have gone a little bit over time, so I just want to go through these few things very, very quickly. Consider yourself an information source and try to bring something to the conversation that nobody else has brought, whether that's a personal experience or an anecdote, or whether it's a piece of evidence that you think has not been presented by anybody else. Try to bring something that is important and unique. Tell the truth. Make sure you've got the facts straight. There's nothing that's going to ruin your credibility faster than having it wrong. Know who's on your side. Know the opposition. We just talked about that. If there's a personal connection, your kid went to school with their kid, or your cousin is a friend of their wife or something. I mean, any little personal connection that you can bring to the conversation, it's helpful just to break the ice and make it a personal affair, make it a relationship. Don't be afraid to admit you don't know. If they ask you something and you don't have the facts straight, just say you don't know, and you'll get back to them with the information that they're looking for. Be specific about what you want. Ask for their vote. And follow up with an email or a thank you. Don't burn any bridges. They may not be with you on this one, but they will be with you on something else. So you want to keep the conversation open, even if their views are diametrically opposed to your own. And remember, you elected them. These are public servants, and they're there to represent we, the people. So just one more reiteration on this: be authentic, keep it simple, pick one or two key points, put it in your own words, tell your own story. There's nothing that's more powerful than your own story when you're under the dome. Follow it. We're going to just go through this very quickly because I know that we're running out of time, but here are a couple of links that you can use to track bills, and I know some of these came up in a prior webinar. This first one is the directory of bills. I'll just go there very quickly. You'll see this is from the 128th. There were almost 2,000 bills, but by going to these links, you can see all the bills as they are printed. And if you're like me, you're looking at this every day to figure out which new bills have come up and whether those bills are in our area. We went to this site on a previous slide, so that's a good one to keep in mind also. And then finally, this particular website was one that was covered in webinar number 2, and it's where you can search by bill title, by sponsor, by topic area, by any number of criteria. So if you're looking for the early voting bill, this would be the way to go. Pam, you want to do anything on this particular slide?
Is this where you want me to talk about the Senate and House calendars, or is that the next one?
If you want to. I think we're running over, but
there's another two documents that I use frequently, and it's the House and Senate calendars. Every day that the legislature is in session, not days that they just have committees, but the days that they go to the floors, House and Senate, there's a calendar produced of what's happening that day. And it's a real important tool to use because you can find out if your bill's coming up that day, what the disposition of that bill is. And so it's printed, it's available also in the document room. And if you come to the State House, if you go to the House chamber or the Senate chamber, there are copies of it there. And it's very useful, a very useful tool to use. The other thing that you can do is, and you should do, is leave a voice message for your legislator. You can call the 800 numbers. Both the House and the Senate have 800 numbers, And you want to also make your message brief, but you could say, for example, my name is Pam Cahill. I'm calling in support of LD 100, an act to do section this and such, and I would like a call back, and my phone number is. That's one way to do it. You can do that for both the House and the Senate. The other thing you can do is call them at home. Again, a citizens legislature is what we have in Maine, which is a great thing. And once the register, which has, we call it the picture book, is printed, it will have their home phone numbers, and some of them put their cell phone numbers in, as well as their email addresses. So use that, and you can also find that information online.
So if you have more information about testifying, advocacy, volunteering opportunities, you can contact us. Sarah Rawlings is our advocacy and organizing director. Her email is there along with her phone number, and we really welcome you to our advocacy efforts in the 129th. We are up to the question point here, and even though I am not very familiar with this technology, I'm going to try to find the questions here. I see one from Nadine. What is the setting for Lobby Day, and do you submit op-eds the same as LTEs? Good question. Our Lobby Day this year will be at the State House. We're not sure the exact meeting room, but we're going to be under the dome for most of the day. There may be some training and other events in other conference rooms, but it will be in Augusta. We are hoping to set that up for February 14th. And we hope that all of you will join us for that. You submit op-eds and LTEs online. If you need help figuring out what the email address is for the paper that you're wanting to submit to, we can help you with that. But most of the papers, when they're online, have a link, a contact link for submitting letters or opinion eds, and they all accept them through an online form. So that's the way to do it, is online for sure. Here's another one from Nadine. Thank you for keeping this going with a few questions, Nadine. What resource can we use to find these websites after this webinar? We will be posting the entire webinar along with the handouts to the League's website within a day or two, and I think Dina will send around a confirming email to the participants that will have those links in it too. Is that right, Dina? Maybe Dina's muted, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
The other thing that you can always do is go to maine.legislature.gov, and you can find many links that will help you navigate the legislative field.
I'm sorry, Ann, I am here. I was muted. Sorry. All attendees may be able to see in your click down menu of your control panel a section called handouts. In that section, you'll see 4 PDFs, 3 of which are op-eds to show as examples, 2 are letters to the editor, and then there's also a PDF that includes this entire presentation. So the links and all the information you need is right in that.
Thanks, Dina. We have another question here from Suzanne. She says, in a public hearing, if your written testimony includes 1 or 2 points that you don't have time to make orally, but that you think are important, realistically, will it get read? If you can't make the public hearing, does it make sense to submit written testimony, and will it get read? Yeah, I'll let Pam weigh in on this too, but in my experience, legislators are so swamped with material. I mean, they have to sit there and listen to you during the public hearing, and they may even wander in and out at that. I have done it and submitted, written up longer testimony that included important material and citations, evidence, and charts. I think the extent to which that actually gets used is somewhat limited, unless you're making a personal contact and following up with that committee member and asking them to look at the material. What's your view on that, Pam?
I agree with that. If you don't have time, and you know you're not going to have time to make all of your points, the thing is, you could say, I'm going to talk to you about 2 points, but I have other points that I would like to make that I've included in my written testimony for you to take a look at it. I find that legislators are pretty good about reading stuff that comes across their desk. So, you know, don't hesitate to add more in your testimony than you actually present orally.
So then that would say yes to Suzanne's second question. If you can't make it to the public hearing, but you want to submit testimony in writing, it will get read and it does get posted. You know, each committee member will have that piece of written testimony put in their folder by the clerk. And when the work session comes, that written testimony will be there for them to consult as they're working the bill. Here's another one from Suzanne. Any hints about responding to committee members' questions? This is a good one. I feel like the committee members are more likely to ask somebody questions if that person appears confident and relaxed. If somebody goes up there and they can see that the person is out of their comfort zone, they're unlikely to try to make it worse unless they're really annoyed for some reason. So if you're wanting to solicit questions, the best thing that you can do is to appear relaxed and even ask one of the committee members ahead of time to ask you a particular question. And if they do ask you a question, again, answer in as straightforward and clear a manner as possible. And if they ask you something that you don't know for sure, just say, I don't know, I'll get back to you on that. If you do respond to a question like that with a follow-up afterwards, send an email to all the members of the committee with the response to that question so that everybody has the benefit of the research that you've done. You want to add to that at all, Pam?
No, you did a good job.
Thank you. Do you recommend lobbying senators and reps who are not your own? This is coming from Denise. I think you are going to find that you have the most leverage and people are going to listen to you when they're from your own district. So if you're doing, let's say, an email or a telephone call, the people that you want to target with that are the people who are actually representing you. The place where I think it's a little bit different is if we are going to Augusta for a lobby day and we're trying to go through what's called the whip list. You know, we've got our list of people and we're counting up the votes in the House and we're counting up the votes in the Senate and we're trying to talk to as many people as we can. You know, that's the place where it makes sense to talk to people who are not your representative and just try to gather the information that we talked about. Are they with you? Are they undecided? Or are they opposed? But for the most part, when we're asking you to call, we're asking you to call your own people because those are the people that are going to listen to you the most closely. What do you say, Pam?
I think that we've said this already, but I think it bears repeating, though. Maine really is just a great big community. So I bet that there are more people in the legislature that you have some kind of a connection to than you would think. So I think it's always important to talk to people, other people other than your legislator. Oftentimes your legislator is not on the committee that you're going to be testifying before. So it's good to find out a little bit about the members that you're testifying in front of and see if you can make that personal connection. And if not, just say, Senator so-and-so, I understand that you're a tree farmer and my husband used to grow Christmas trees or something like that. It's easy to and make a connection and people appreciate that.
We have a question from Nicole. Can you have a proxy read testimony out loud for you if you are unable to travel to Augusta? You can, and I have seen that done. I will say the most striking example was the day that we had gone to, it might have even been the Appropriations Committee on a clean elections bill, and we had maybe 4 or 5 people with us who would come in person to speak their convictions about the importance of clean elections and the dangers of money in politics. The opposition had drummed up, I'm going to say 15 or 20 pieces of written testimony that they had submitted by proxy. And so one after another, legislators who weren't even in their district, but who were opposed to clean elections, got up and read this testimony. And at the end, you know, they were all on one side. At the end came our turn, and we had a young lady with us who stood up and said, geez, I wish I had known I could do that. I left my 2 babies at home in order to be here in person, and all these people phoned it in. So you can send a proxy, and you obviously can submit written testimony, but it's a lot more effective if you're there in person. I don't know how you feel about that, Pam. Yeah, okay.
I agree.
Yep. Here's another one from Mason. How does one get a legislative resolution as opposed to a bill introduced? And what is the legislative procedure for passing it? Pam is the master of the rules. So I'm going to just punt this right over to Pam.
Well, a resolution does not have the force of law. So it just asks the legislature to do something. It asks a question. And so you would also have to go to a legislator to have them sponsor a resolution. You would have to have it pretty much drafted. You just couldn't say in a resolution to have a day called Clean Elections Day. You would have to have some verbiage to say exactly why this is an important resolution. And then it goes to the floor. Usually resolutions do not have public hearings. It's just a resolution that goes to the floor, and it's acted on that day. Also, they can be introduced in either the House or the Senate, but they have to go back and forth, as you know, in order to get passed.
If you have something like that, though, the surest way to get it introduced is to ask your legislator to sponsor it. Many legislators have a point of principle that they will put in anything a constituent asks them to put in. You know, they may not support it, they may not work for it, but they will put it in for you. We have a question here. Can you email the committee as well so that they can get links in the email so that they don't have to type the links into the computer? Yes, of course you can. And the committee assignments have not yet been made, but when they are, the legislative email addresses for all the committee members will be available. And you can certainly email them. You know, unless you have a special question that you're addressing with one, it's a good idea to send whatever you're sending to all of them so that they all have the same information. I have another question here from Nadine, still a little confused on lobby day. Are all the legislators in one room and you work the room, or how does that work? Pam, please describe the chaos that is under the dome, please.
Well, you call it chaos. I love it. At lobby day, usually if you have an organized lobby day like you will have on February 14th, everyone gets together in a certain room and you kind of map out a strategy for the day. But then you go to the third floor, and the third floor is the reason they call it lobbying is because you're in under the dome and you're actually talking to individuals, and there could be 30 people there or 300 people there. And when the bells start ringing, the legislators start going into their respective chambers for the day's events and everything, and it's good to kind of grab them quickly. But it is a little bit chaotic generally on lobby day. So it's good to do your research, to know a little bit about your legislator, to know what he or she looks like, at least what their picture looks like. And as they're heading into the Senate chamber or the House chamber, be sure you make whatever conversation brief, because they probably will be in a hurry to get into their seats. It's fun though. Don't be discouraged about it. It's a great education.
And we have a question harkening back to the previous question. Can you give an example of a resolution? Like, why would somebody submit a resolution instead of a bill?
Well, like a resolutions in, I think, are a little different in the Maine legislature than they are in Congress, but like I said, it doesn't have the force of law. It just, a resolution, be it resolved, a resolution just has a, it might proclaim a day that is a special day or a special week or something like that. So generally speaking, you would only use a resolution, and you might be confused on the wording or the type of bill that you're putting in, but it would not be a resolution. It would be just a resolve. A resolve, on the other hand, is also a bill that does not have the force of law but directs the legislature to do something. So that might be what you're talking about, is a resolve rather than a resolution. So you would put a resolve in. So, for example, be it resolved that the Legal and Veterans Affairs Committee looks at different ways to fund clean elections. So that is not directing law. That is directing the committee to do something. So it does not have the force of law. Now, if the Legal and Veterans Affairs Committee decided that they wanted to do that and put out a bill, then that would result in legislation. But a resolve does not have the force of law.
Thanks, Pam. We've got another question here from Suzanne. Would it be a good idea to gather a group of people who are from your town and who are in favor or opposed to some bill to meet as a group with your representatives? I think that's an excellent idea, and it's not overkill at all. Yeah, go ahead, Pam.
Sure, that's a great idea. I mean, you know, if you have 3 people or 10 people, it's better than they do listen to you, and it makes a difference when you come and actually participate in the process, because they'll remember that when it comes time to push a red or a green button, they're going to say, well, those 10 people are in my district and they wanted me to vote yes on this bill. So, you know, they will remember it. And they always aren't going to vote your way. Maybe they're philosophically opposed to what you're asking them to do. But, you know, a group of 10 is a big group. We used to say if a legislator got 10 calls, it would be a mandate. It's a little different now where we have all the social media and so many electronic tools that we use. But years ago, if 10 people called you on a bill, that bill was something special in your district.
Well, and if you can get a group of 10 people together, you don't even have to go to Augusta. You can ask them to meet with you in your home or at the public library and have an in-district meeting with your legislator and talk that issue over with them. So if you can get a group like that together, it's very powerful. And whether you do it in your hometown or if you do it in Augusta, it's definitely worth doing. All right, I think we're to the end of the, let me just click through my technology here. Oh, here's another one. This is from Mason again. One might want the legislature to urge the U.S. Congress to pass a certain legislation, e.g., requiring the identity of donors to C4. I don't know if that's a resolve or a resolution, Mason, but it's a good example. A few years ago, we got the legislature to pass, I think it was a resolve, directing our federal delegation to support efforts to overturn Citizens United. And that was not a law, but it was a resolve. I think Pam in it did direct our federal delegation to take some action. A resolution, on the other hand, last session, we got a joint resolution from both chambers recognizing the work of the League of Women Voters over the 98 years of our history. That was more in the nature of a resolution, and we were very grateful for it.
Well, this has been fun.
Checking yeah. I don't see any more questions here. There may be some here, but I'm not good enough with the technology to find them. So I think we're probably done for today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We're just a little bit short of the 1 hour mark, but we really enjoyed doing it and hope that we'll see some of you at the State House or on the pages of our local papers as the session gets going. Look for the next webinar announcement from Dina. It will begin to cover our legislative agenda, the work that we're doing for making democracy work, voting rights, elections, money in politics, and we're really looking forward to starting to talk to you about the work that lies ahead this session. So thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you then.